Get out of here, you starving old woman. You're not my mother. The glass of cold water splashed across Maria's face with such force that for a moment she couldn't tell whether it was water or tears running down her wrinkled cheeks. Her glasses fell onto the marble floor and shattered with a sharp crack as if her heart had shattered with them. For a brief second, the mansion went silent. The chandelier above them glittered coldly, reflecting a scene no amount of money could soften. Maria stood frozen in the center of the foyer, her thin shoulders trembling, water dripping from her hair onto a blouse worn soft by decades of work. She blinked, confused, her vision blurred without her glasses trying to focus on the figure towering above her on the staircase. Vanessa didn't move. From her elevated step, she looked down at the woman who had given her life, her eyes sharp with disgust, fear, and something darker, shame. In that moment, she wasn't seeing a mother. She was seeing a past she had sworn to erase. At the edge of the room, the security gate outside hummed faintly as it closed. Somewhere beyond the tall iron bars, traffic passed like any ordinary afternoon. Inside, an unspoken line had been crossed. Maria bent slowly, her knees aching, and reached for the broken pieces of her glasses. Her fingers shook as she gathered them from the flawless marble, careful not to cut herself. Each shard felt heavier than the last. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't beg. Vanessa's jaw tightened as she glanced toward the front windows, checking if any neighbors were watching. Appearances still mattered more than anything. And outside, across the street, unnoticed by either of them, a man dressed entirely in white stood still. He had been there longer than anyone realized. His eyes were fixed on the open doorway, filled not with anger, but with a deep, aching compassion. What neither mother nor daughter understood in that moment, what no one in that house could imagine, was that this single act of humiliation had already set something in motion. Something sacred, something irreversible. Because when a mother's tears fall to the ground, heaven does not remain silent for long. No one inside that mansion heard Maria's footsteps fade down the long driveway. The heavy door had already closed, sealing her out as completely as if she had never belonged there at all. What lingered was not the sound of broken glass, but the weight of rejection, the kind that cuts deeper when it comes from one's own blood. Rejection does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes wrapped in silence, in unanswered calls and doors that never open again. For Maria, it had been arriving for years. Missed holidays, messages left unread, birthdays marked alone with a candle and a whispered prayer. But standing there soaked and shaking, she felt its full force all at once. Not as a single wound, but as a lifetime of being erased. She stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching the broken frames in her hand, as if they were the last proof she still existed. Without her glasses, the world blurred into shapes and shadows. Cars passed. Lawns glowed green behind iron fences. Lives continued untouched. To anyone watching, she was just another old woman, leaving a place where she clearly did not belong. Inside the house, Vanessa leaned against the wall, her chest rising and falling too fast. She told herself this was necessary, that cutting ties was strength, that survival meant never looking back. Yet even as she smoothed her designer jacket and wiped an invisible splash from the marble floor, something tightened behind her ribs, a pressure she refused to name. Rejection works both ways. The one cast out carries the pain openly. The one who rejects carries it silently, letting it harden into something colder. Maria reached the corner of the street and stopped. Her legs trembled beneath her. Hunger clawed at her stomach, but it was nothing compared to the hollow ache in her chest. She had not come asking for love. She had not asked for forgiveness or money or a place to stay. She had only asked for food, one meal, one small mercy. To be turned away like a stranger would have been cruel enough. To be turned away like an embarrassment was unbearable. She lowered herself onto a bus stop bench, the cold metal biting through her thin clothes. Her hands rested in her lap, folded the way they always had when she prayed. Around her, the city moved on phones, buzzing engines, humming laughter drifting past. No one noticed the quiet collapse happening right there in the open. Somewhere deep inside her, a question formed, not angry, not accusing, just weary. How does a mother become someone her child is ashamed to be seen with? And yet even then, bitterness did not rise. What rose instead was something softer, more painful, and far stronger. Love that had nowhere to go. Love with no guarantee of return. She lifted her face toward the sky, blinking back tears she no longer tried to hide. Whatever dignity she had left, she gathered it around herself like a threadbare shawl. There are wounds the body can endure and still survive. But when rejection comes from the one you gave everything to, it leaves a silence so deep that only heaven can hear it, and heaven was listening. Long before that afternoon of shattered glass and silence, Maria's life had already been shaped by loss. She had been 52 when the knock came at her door. Two men from the construction company stood on the porch, hats in their hands, eyes lowered. Her husband Daniel had been killed instantly when a steel beam slipped from its harness. No goodbye, no last words. Just a folded jacket returned with apologies that could never fill the space he left behind. Overnight, Maria became a widow with 3 children and no safety net. Vanessa was 18, then sharp-eyed and restless. Ethan was 15, quiet and observant. Little Benny was barely 12, still believing his mother could fix anything. Maria didn't cry in front of them. She went into the bathroom, pressed a towel to her mouth, and prayed until her knees hurt. When she came out, she rolled up her sleeves. From that moment on, her days began before sunrise. At 4 in the morning, she stood over a small stove cooking breakfast tacos to sell to commuters heading to work. By 7, she was scrubbing floors in houses that smelled of lemon cleaner and money. In the afternoon, she washed other people's clothes in a cracked plastic tub behind her apartment. At night, when her children slept, she stitched fabric for a garment shop that paid by the piece pennies for hours of labor. Her hands hardened, her back curved, her body aged faster than the calendar allowed. But the children ate. School uniforms were clean. Homework was done under a single flickering bulb. When the fridge was almost empty, Maria would tell them she wasn't hungry and sip broth while they finished the last tortillas. Each night, she knelt beside her bed. Sometimes the prayers were whispered. Sometimes they were sobs she couldn't stop. She never asked for riches, never asked for comfort. She asked for strength, for one more day, for her children to have choices she never did. Faith was not something Maria talked about. It was something she lived quietly. A worn Bible sat by her bed, pages softened by years of turning. A small image of the Virgin hung crooked on the wall, kissed before work, and again before sleep. When exhaustion pressed so hard she thought she might collapse, she repeated the same words she had learned as a girl: God sees. God knows. And for a long time it seemed he did. Vanessa graduated high school at the top of her class. Maria worked double shifts to help her enroll in college. She bought used textbooks, skipped meals, ignored her own doctor's warnings about blood sugar and blood pressure. The future mattered more than her body, it always had. When Vanessa walked across that graduation stage, Maria cried harder than she had at her husband's funeral. Not because of pride alone, but because every blister, every ache, every lonely night suddenly felt worth it. What Maria did not see then was the quiet distance forming, the way gratitude slowly gave way to embarrassment, how the very sacrifices meant to lift her daughter up would one day be treated as something to hide. But even as the years passed and her strength faded, Maria's faith did not. She still believed love never failed. She still believed a mother's labor was never wasted. And she still believed that God, who had carried her this far, had not forgotten her now, even when everything else would. From the time she was a child, Vanessa understood something that terrified her. Poverty had a smell, a sound, and a shape, and it followed her everywhere. It was the way her classmates wrinkled their noses when she opened her lunchbox, the way their parents' eyes lingered on her mother's worn shoes during school meetings, the way her apartment walls were thin enough for neighbors' arguments to bleed through at night. Vanessa learned early that being poor was not just about lacking money, it was about being seen, and she hated being seen like that. When friends asked to come over, Vanessa made excuses. When they didn't accept them, she rushed through introductions, apologizing for the peeling paint and the cramped space as if she were responsible for it all. She noticed everything: Maria's tired hands, the thrift store clothes, the same meals repeated week after week. While her mother saw survival, Vanessa saw humiliation. She began to measure herself against others: better grades, cleaner shoes, straighter posture. She studied not just her textbooks, but the people around her, how the confident girls spoke, how they dressed, how they laughed without checking who was listening. Somewhere deep inside, a promise formed: I will never live like this. Maria sensed the distance, but misunderstood it. She thought her daughter's silence was focus, her sharp edges, a sign of ambition. When Vanessa complained about the food, the apartment, the way things smelled, Maria responded with patience. "One day, Mija," she would say softly, "you'll have everything you deserve. I'll make sure of it." Vanessa heard something else. She heard delay, waiting, more years of being the girl from the poor side of town. As she grew older, the shame sharpened into drive. She stayed up late studying not out of curiosity, but out of desperation. Failure was not an option. It was a return ticket to a life she despised. She watched her mother come home, exhausted hands, swollen shoulders, bowed, and told herself she would never end up like that. Not because she didn't love Maria, but because she feared becoming her. In high school, teachers praised Vanessa's discipline. Counselors spoke of scholarships and opportunity. Every compliment reinforced the same belief escape was possible if she worked hard enough. And work she did, pushing herself past exhaustion, cutting corners in relationships, learning to rely on no one. Gratitude slowly twisted into resentment. Why should she have to climb so hard while others were born at the top? Why did love always come wrapped in sacrifice and shame? She stopped reaching for her mother's hand in public. She stopped saying where she came from. When Maria spoke with pride about her work, Vanessa looked away. By the time she left for college, Vanessa had learned how to wear confidence like armor. She learned how to smile while hiding where she came from. And she learned the most dangerous lesson of all, that if she moved fast enough, high enough, she could outrun her past. What she didn't understand then was this shame never disappears. It only changes shape. And one day that same shame, left unhealed, left unnamed, would turn into something far crueler than poverty ever was. College was the first place where Vanessa felt the distance between who she had been and who she wanted to become begin to close. The campus was clean, expansive, and filled with people who spoke about their futures as if success were already guaranteed. Vanessa arrived with a single suitcase, used textbooks, and a quiet determination that frightened even her. She worked part-time between classes, studied late into the night, and learned how to sound confident even when she felt out of place. To her professors, she was disciplined. To her classmates, she was driven. No one knew how carefully she edited her past. Maria watched all of this from a distance. Each semester meant another stack of bills, another double shift, another skipped meal. She never told Vanessa when the lights were almost shut off or when her hands shook from exhaustion. When her daughter called, Maria's voice was always steady. "Focus on school," she would say. "I'm fine." Vanessa graduated with honors. The applause in the auditorium felt like proof that the promise she had made as a child was finally within reach. For the first time, doors opened without her having to push them down. An entry-level position, a corporate office, a badge with her name printed neatly across it. She had crossed an invisible line, and she never wanted to cross back. It was at a networking event downtown that she met Grant. He stood apart from the crowd, calm and assured, speaking easily to people who seemed eager for his attention. He was older, well-dressed, and carried himself like someone accustomed to being listened to. When he turned toward Vanessa, his smile was polite, measured, curious. They talked about business, about growth, about ambition. Grant asked where she worked, what she wanted, how far she planned to go. He didn't ask about her family. He didn't ask where she came from. And Vanessa noticed, relieved. Grant represented everything she believed she needed: stability, influence, access to rooms she had never been allowed into before. Being with him felt like stepping into a version of life where she no longer had to explain herself. Maria sensed the shift the first time Vanessa brought Grant home. Her daughter spoke differently, moved differently, dressed as if already rehearsing for another world. Grant was polite, distant, his eyes briefly scanning the apartment before looking away. He never returned after that evening. The relationship moved quickly. 6 months later, there was a proposal, a ring that sparkled under restaurant lights. Congratulations from people Maria had never met. Vanessa told herself this was love, or at least close enough to it. The wedding was elegant, expensive, carefully curated. Maria sat near the back, hands folded in her lap, smiling through tears as she watched her daughter walk toward a life she herself would never touch. Vanessa barely noticed. After the honeymoon, Vanessa moved into Grant's gated estate, a house with high ceilings, quiet hallways, and a sense of permanence she had always craved. From the outside, she had won. What she did not recognize was the cost. Opportunity had come just as she had prayed it would, but it had arrived carrying a subtle demand leave the past behind, and Vanessa, without fully realizing it, was already beginning to pay. The wedding was everything Vanessa had imagined and everything Maria had quietly feared. Crystal chandeliers filled the ballroom with light. Tables were dressed in white linen and soft gold accents. A string quartet played as guests arrived in tailored suits and elegant dresses, greeting one another with the ease of people who had always belonged in rooms like this. It was the kind of celebration magazines loved to photograph. Maria arrived early, clutching a small purse, wearing the nicest dress she owned. She had pressed it carefully the night before, smoothing the fabric again and again, as if she could iron out the years. When she stepped into the ballroom, she hesitated, suddenly unsure where to stand. The floor gleamed beneath her shoes. Voices floated past her, polite but distant. She searched for Vanessa. When she finally saw her daughter radiant in white surrounded by friends, Maria's chest tightened with pride. This was the future she had prayed for. This was the life her sacrifice had built. She smiled, waiting for Vanessa to notice her. Vanessa did notice. For a fraction of a second, their eyes met. And in that second, something flickered across Vanessa's face. Not warmth, not joy, but calculation. She glanced around the room, then back at her mother. Instead of waving, she turned slightly, positioning herself so Maria was no longer in clear view. Throughout the evening, Maria remained on the edge of the celebration. She was introduced once or twice quickly without detail. "This is my mother," Vanessa said, her tone polite but distant, already moving on to the next conversation. No stories were shared, no gratitude spoken. Maria was present, but only barely. From Vanessa's perspective, everything had to be perfect. The lighting, the photos, the guest list. Every image captured would live forever, online, framed, remembered. And there was no place in that image for reminders of where she had come from. After the reception, when the guests had gone, and the staff began clearing tables, Vanessa called Maria aside. She handed her a small envelope pressed into her palm without meeting her eyes. "Thank you for helping earlier," she said, as if speaking to a service worker. "This should cover it." Maria understood immediately. The words stung, but the meaning cut deeper. She nodded, slipped the envelope into her purse, and left without another word. She walked home alone, tears blurring the streetlights, telling herself this was just how things were now. After the wedding, the distance became official. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages were returned days later, if at all. Invitations never came. When Maria asked if she could visit, Vanessa always had a reason: work, travel plans. Each excuse added another layer of silence. In the world Vanessa had built, her mother no longer fit. To Vanessa, this was progress. Clean lines, clean boundaries. A perfected life, carefully curated and carefully protected. To Maria, it was something else entirely. It was the slow realization that love once taken for granted had been quietly erased, edited out of the picture, as if it had never been there at all. After the wedding, time did not soften the silence. It sharpened it. At first, Maria told herself the distance was temporary. Newlyweds were busy. Life moved fast. She waited for the calls to return, for holidays to bring reconciliation, for some sign that the door was still open. None came. Weeks turned into months, then into years, and the quiet settled in like dust that no one bothered to wipe away. Then came the losses. Ethan called one evening to say he had accepted a job out of state. It was a good opportunity, he said, the kind Maria had always prayed her children would have. She congratulated him through tears and told him not to worry about her. He promised to visit soon. Life carried him forward as it should. Benny never got that chance. The accident happened late at night. A motorcycle, a wet road, a phone call that arrived with no warning and left Maria sitting on the edge of her bed, unable to breathe. The funeral passed in a blur of condolences and casseroles. When the crowd thinned, the house felt unbearably empty. One son gone by distance, one by death. And the daughter, who was still alive, had chosen to be absent. Maria's body began to fail under the weight of it all. Years of labor caught up with her. The doctor spoke gently about diabetes, high blood pressure medications she would need for the rest of her life. Maria nodded, but the cost of prescriptions often meant choosing between pills and groceries. Some months she chose groceries. Other months she didn't. Her widow's check barely covered rent. Utilities crept higher. Food became something she rationed carefully. One meal a day, then one every other day. She learned how to quiet hunger with water and prayer. When neighbors offered help, she thanked them, but rarely accepted. Pride, once protective, now isolated her. Even so, she never asked Vanessa. Not at first. But there came a morning when Maria woke up and couldn't stand without gripping the edge of the bed. Her hands shook as she tried to make coffee. The room spun. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The refrigerator held only condiments and a half-empty carton of milk gone sour. She sat down slowly, breath shallow, and stared at the wall. For the first time, the thought entered her mind without resistance. I can't do this alone anymore. Asking her daughter for help felt like reopening a wound she had spent years trying to close. But hunger has a way of stripping pride bare. She didn't want money. She didn't want a place to stay. She wanted food, just one meal. Enough to make the shaking stop. She wrapped herself in her old sweater, the one that still smelled faintly of detergent and memory, and whispered a prayer she had said countless times before. Not for miracles, not for justice, just for strength to take one more step. By the time she closed the door behind her, Maria did not know whether she was walking toward help or humiliation. She only knew that the bottom had finally given way, and there was nowhere left to fall. The morning Maria set out, the sky over Texas was already heavy with heat. She had not eaten in 2 days. Her hands trembled as she locked the door to her small apartment, steadying herself against the frame before turning toward the road. The address was burned into her memory, even though she had only been there once. High walls, trimmed hedges, a place where the streets were quiet because nothing unpleasant was meant to pass through. It took nearly 2 hours on foot. By the time she reached the gated community, sweat soaked her blouse, and her legs felt unsteady beneath her. The guard booth stood like a checkpoint between two worlds. Inside, cool air hummed. Outside, Maria waited, clutching her purse with both hands as if it might keep her upright. "Who are you here to see?" the guard asked, his tone polite but doubtful. "My daughter Mariah," replied softly. "Vanessa Hart." The guard hesitated. He knew that name. Everyone did. He looked Maria over again, her worn shoes, her thin frame, the sweater wrapped tightly around her shoulders, and picked up the phone. When Vanessa's voice came through, the speaker sharp and irritated, Maria could hear it clearly, even from where she stood. "There's an older woman here," the guard said carefully. "She says she's your mother." There was a pause. Then Vanessa's reply came cold and clipped. "Tell her I'm not home." The guard lowered the phone, embarrassed. Maria's chest tightened. She swallowed hard, then leaned closer. "Please," she said, her voice barely holding. "Tell her I just need a little food. I haven't eaten in 2 days." The guard hesitated, then dialed again. This time, Vanessa's answer was different. "Fine," she snapped. "Let her in. I'll deal with it." The gate opened. Maria walked past manicured lawns and silent houses that looked more like museums than homes. Curtains shifted as people glanced out, curiosity flickering in their eyes. She reached the largest house on the street and pressed the doorbell, her heart pounding louder than the chime. The door flew open. Vanessa stood there, her face tight with anger, glancing quickly over her shoulder to make sure no one was watching. "Get inside," she hissed, pulling Maria by the arm and slamming the door shut behind her. The foyer gleamed with marble and light. Everything was spotless, untouched. Maria suddenly felt smaller than she ever had before. "What do you want?" Vanessa demanded. Maria's throat burned. "Mija," she whispered, "I'm so sorry to bother you. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I only came to ask for a little food. Anything." Vanessa let out a short, bitter laugh. "You walked all the way here to beg. Do you have any idea what you look like? What the neighbors will think? I'm not begging," Maria said, tears gathering in her eyes. "You're my daughter." "I'm not your daughter," Vanessa snapped. "I made myself. All you ever gave me was poverty and embarrassment." Maria reached out instinctively, then stopped herself. "I worked my whole life for you," she said, her voice breaking. "I only enough," Vanessa said, turning away. She returned seconds later with a glass of water filled to the brim. Maria's shoulders sagged with relief, believing just for a moment that mercy had arrived. Instead, the water flew. It struck Maria's face without warning, ice cold and violent. Her glasses slipped, hit the marble floor, and shattered. Vanessa pointed toward the door, her voice shaking with rage. "Get out of here, you starving old woman. Don't ever come back. You disgust me." Maria knelt slowly, gathering the broken pieces of her glasses with trembling fingers. Water dripped from her hair onto the floor. When she stood, she turned back one last time, tears streaming freely now. "May God forgive you, Mija," she whispered, "because I always will." Then she walked back through the door alone, carrying nothing with her but hunger, heartbreak, and a love that even humiliation could not kill. Maria walked until the gates were far behind her, and the quiet streets of the neighborhood dissolved into the noise of the city. The heat pressed down on her like a weight. Water still dripped from her hair and sleeves, cooling her skin for only a moment before the sun reclaimed it. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time she reached the bus stop, her legs finally gave in. She sat down slowly on the metal bench, gripping the edge to keep herself from falling. The world tilted. Her heart raced, then slowed, as if unsure whether to keep going. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer that barely had the strength to become words. "Lord, I can't do this anymore." When she opened her eyes, she noticed she was no longer alone. A man sat a few feet away, dressed entirely in white. Not bright or shining, just simple. Clean. His clothes looked ordinary, yet out of place, as if time had brushed past him without leaving a mark. He watched her with a calm that unsettled her, not because it was cold, but because it was gentle. "You're hungry," he said. It wasn't a question. Maria tried to protest out of habit more than pride. "I'll be all right," she murmured. "I just need to rest." He stood and moved closer. His eyes, deep brown, steady, met hers. "You haven't eaten in days," he said softly. "Come with me." She hesitated. She didn't know him. But something in his voice carried both authority and care, like a hand offered before she realized she was falling. They walked only a few blocks to a small diner tucked between closed storefronts. The sign above the door read, "Good Samaritan." Inside, the smell of hot food wrapped around Maria like a blanket. Her stomach clenched painfully. The man ordered without looking at a menu. Soup, bread, a full plate. When the food arrived, steam rose into the air, and Maria's hands trembled as she lifted the spoon. "May I pray?" he asked. She nodded. He bowed his head. "Father, thank you for providing when hope feels lost. Bless this woman who has carried more pain than she deserved. Remind her that she is seen, that she is loved, and that she has never walked alone." Tears slipped down Maria's face and into the soup. She whispered amen and began to eat. Each bite brought warmth back into her body, but something deeper was happening too. Something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. After a while, he asked her what had happened, and she told him everything. The years of sacrifice, the silence, the walk, the water, the words that had shattered what little strength she had left. "I still love her," Maria said quietly, ashamed of how weak it sounded. "Even after everything." The man nodded. "That kind of love is rare," he said. "It reflects the heart of God." When they finished, he paid the bill and left a generous tip. Outside, the sun was beginning to sink, casting the street in gold. He walked her home, listening more than speaking. At her door, he paused and looked around the small room, the worn furniture, the flickering light, the image of the Virgin on the wall. "Promise me something," he said. Maria looked up at him. "Don't give up," he continued. "Not on life, not on love, and not on God. What happened today will not go unanswered." She felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. "What is your name?" she asked. He smiled. "You can call me a friend." Then he turned and walked away. Maria stepped outside, moments later searching the street. He was gone, but the hunger was gone too. And for the first time that day, Maria felt certain of one thing: heaven had seen her. That night, Vanessa lay awake long after the house had gone quiet. Grant slept beside her, breathing slow and even untouched by the tension coiled inside her chest. The ceiling fan turned steadily overhead, its rhythm usually enough to lull her into rest. Not tonight. Every time she closed her eyes, the same image surfaced: water dripping from her mother's hair, the sound of glass breaking against marble, the way Maria's shoulders had folded inward without a single word of protest. Vanessa told herself it was nothing. Guilt passed. Everyone felt it sometimes. She rolled onto her side, then back again, staring at the dark. 3 hours passed, then 4. By morning, sleep still hadn't come. The days that followed were worse. She kept her schedule full, meetings, workouts, lunches, at places where the plates were artfully arranged and the prices high enough to command respect. She ordered what she always ordered, ate what she always ate, and felt nothing. The food tasted flat like cardboard dressed up in sauce. Her friends laughed and talked about vacations and renovations, and Vanessa smiled on cue, nodding at the right moments, her mind drifting somewhere she couldn't reach. At night, the silence returned. She showered longer than usual, scrubbing her skin as if she could wash something away. When she turned off the water, the chill hit her all at once. Not a cold from the air, but from within. She wrapped herself in a towel and caught her reflection in the mirror. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, eyes that wouldn't meet their own gaze. Sleep refused her again. On the third night, she went downstairs for water. The house felt too large, every step echoing louder than it should have. She flipped on the kitchen light and froze. On the dining table lay a familiar blue shawl, worn thin at the edges, folded neatly, unmistakable. Her mother's. Vanessa's heart slammed against her ribs. She hadn't brought it here. No one had. The doors were locked, the security system untouched. Her hands trembled as she reached for the fabric, half expecting it to vanish. It didn't. Beneath it was a small piece of paper, handwritten in a careful, unfamiliar script. A mother's love does not die when it is rejected. How long will you keep running from your own heart? Vanessa dropped the note as if it burned. The house was silent, but she felt watched, not with anger, not with accusation, but with a sadness that pressed down on her chest until it was hard to breathe. She backed away from the table and hurried upstairs, pulling the covers over her head, like a child hiding from the dark. Morning came without rest. Her appetite vanished completely. Coffee sat untouched. Grant studied her across the counter, concern flickering briefly before he returned to his phone. "You look exhausted," he said. Vanessa nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Over the next few days, the signs followed her. A commercial showing a mother and daughter embracing made her change the channel. A passing comment from a nail technician. "You should bring your mom sometime," sent a sharp pain through her stomach. At dinner alone one evening, she opened the refrigerator, stared at shelves full of food, and felt an overwhelming nausea. "My mother hasn't eaten in days," a voice whispered inside her. She shut the door hard, palms pressed flat against the cool steel breath coming too fast. Vanessa had built her life on control, on cutting away anything that threatened the image she had created. But now something unseen was dismantling it piece by piece. Not loudly, not violently, quietly, relentlessly. As if the price of what she had done was no longer something she could outrun, and the debt had finally come due. The night Vanessa finally broke the house was completely still. Grant was away on business. The silence felt heavier without him, stretching through the hallways and settling into every corner. Vanessa sat alone in the living room. Lights dimmed, her phone face down on the table, as if it might accuse her if she looked at it too long. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Vanessa's breath caught. She stood up slowly, her heart pounding. "Hello," she called already, knowing how foolish she sounded. The lights steadied, but she was no longer alone. A man sat on the sofa across from her. She staggered back, a scream tearing from her throat. "Who are you? How did you get in here?" Her hands fumbled for her phone. "I'm calling the police." "You can," the man said calmly. His voice was gentle, steady, unchanged by her fear. "But they won't be able to help you with what's happening inside you." Vanessa froze. The man rose to his feet. As the lamplight fell fully across his face, her knees weakened. She had seen that face before in paintings, in churches, in the small images her mother kept by her bed. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real." "You are not imagining this," he said. "And you are not alone." Her breath came in short gasps. Who are you?" "I know every choice you've made, Vanessa," he said softly. "Every word you've spoken, every tear you've shed, and every tear you've caused." Her chest tightened painfully. "You don't know me." "I saw you throw the water," he said, not raising his voice. "I heard the words you used, and I followed your mother when she left this house with nothing but her hunger and her love." Vanessa's legs gave out. She collapsed onto the sofa, trembling. "Stop," she sobbed. "Please stop." "I also saw something you did not," he continued. "I saw her walk for miles without food. I saw her beg God to take her life because the pain was too heavy. And I saw her kneel that same night and pray not for justice, not for revenge, but for you." Vanessa shook her head violently. "No, no. She asked that you be blessed," he said, "that you be protected, that you find peace." The room seemed to spin. Tears streamed down Vanessa's face, ruining her makeup, soaking her sleeves. "Why are you telling me this?" she cried. "Who are you?" The man stepped closer. The air around him felt different, full alive. He extended his hands. Vanessa gasped. Marks faint but unmistakable lined his wrists. Her breath left her in a broken sound. "Jesus," she whispered, sliding off the sofa onto her knees. "You're Jesus Christ." He nodded once. "I came because your mother called to me," Jesus said. Not with her voice, but with her tears. And the tears of a mother always reach heaven. Vanessa collapsed forward, her body shaking with sobs. "Forgive me," she cried. "I didn't know what I was doing." "You knew," Jesus replied gently. "You simply chose to forget." He knelt before her, meeting her gaze. "Come," he said, touching her forehead. The world shifted. Suddenly, Vanessa stood on a street she recognized, the neighborhood of her childhood. She watched her mother, younger and stronger, leaving before dawn with cleaning supplies in hand. She saw Maria scrub floors until her knees bled, skip meals to buy textbooks, pray over sleeping children with tears on her cheeks. The scenes changed rapidly: college days when Vanessa ignored her mother's calls, hospital rooms where Maria lay weak while Vanessa rushed off to meetings, the wedding where Maria sat alone unseen. Vanessa screamed. Enough, the vision dissolved. She was back in the living room, gasping, her face wet with tears. "Now you see," Jesus said quietly, "ambition without gratitude becomes cruelty. Pride without love becomes destruction." Vanessa clutched the floor. "What do I do?" she pleaded. "How do I fix this?" Jesus looked at her with compassion and firmness. "Repent with your life, not just your words. Go to your mother, humble yourself, and know this: she is very weak. Time is not on your side." Vanessa's heart lurched. "Is she going to die?" "That depends on what you do next," Jesus said. And with that, he stood light, seeming to fold around him. "You have been given a chance to become who you were meant to be," he said. "Do not waste it." Then he was gone. Vanessa remained on the floor, shaking, her world in ruins, and for the first time in her life, ready to rebuild it the right way. Vanessa did not wait for morning. The clock on the dashboard glowed past midnight as her car cut through empty streets, tires humming against the pavement. Her hands shook on the steering wheel, tears blurring the road ahead. Every red light felt like an accusation. Every mile felt stolen. She had never prayed like this before, not with words learned in childhood, but with raw desperation. "Please, God, please let me get there in time." She parked crookedly outside the aging apartment building and ran. The hallway smelled of dust and old paint. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared it would wake the neighbors before her knocking did. "Mom," she cried, pounding the door. "Mom, please. It's me." For a moment there was only silence. Then a light flickered on. Slow footsteps approached. The door opened just enough to reveal Maria, smaller than Vanessa remembered, thinner, pale. She leaned against the frame to steady herself, eyes widening in disbelief. "Vanessa," she whispered. Vanessa collapsed forward, falling to her knees on the cold floor. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I treated you like nothing. I threw you away. Please forgive me." Maria's hands trembled as she reached down, lifting her daughter's face. Tears filled her own eyes, not with anger, but with relief. "Oh, Mija," she said softly, "I forgave you the moment you walked out that door." They clung to each other there on the floor, mother and daughter, shaking with sobs that carried years of pain out into the open. Something broke that night, but it was not love. It was pride. From that moment on, everything changed. Vanessa moved Maria into her home and did not hide her. She sat beside her at doctor's appointments, listened as years of exhaustion were finally spoken aloud, and followed every instruction with fierce devotion. She cooked simple meals her mother loved, learned the rhythm of medications, and stayed awake at night just to be sure Maria was breathing easily. Slowly, the color returned to Maria's face. Her hands steadied. Strength crept back where despair had lived. Doctors called it treatment and timing. Vanessa called it mercy. And the change did not stop there. Vanessa began to see the world differently, to hear hunger in passing conversations, to recognize loneliness in faces she once ignored. One evening, she pulled over when she saw an elderly man sitting alone at a bus stop, shoulders hunched against the cold. "Have you eaten today?" she asked. The words stopped her breath. They were the same words her mother had spoken before being turned away. She took him to a small diner and paid for his meal, then another, and another. Soon one corner of the large house became something new, a place where food was always hot and doors were always open. Maria helped, smiling as she ladled soup, telling quiet stories of faith and endurance to anyone who would listen. What had once been a mansion of silence became a home of service. Neighbors noticed. Friends asked questions. Vanessa answered honestly, not with excuses, but with truth. "I forgot who I was," she said, "and God reminded me." One evening, as meals were being served, a man with worn sandals and gentle eyes stepped forward. Vanessa handed him a plate. He smiled a smile she recognized instantly, one that carried peace deeper than words. When she turned to look again, he was gone. The plate was empty. Maria met her daughter's gaze and nodded, tears shining. They both understood. Jesus Christ had never left. He had simply been waiting. This story reminds us of a truth many people learn too. Late success means nothing if it costs us our humanity. Maria's life shows the quiet heroism of parents who sacrifice without keeping score, and Vanessa's fall reminds us how easily pride and shame can blind even a good heart. For those who have lived long enough to love deeply, this story speaks clearly. Time is fragile and relationships are not guaranteed. Words left unsaid, forgiveness delayed, and pride held too tightly can become lifelong regrets. But the story also offers hope. As long as there is breath, there is still a chance to return to humble ourselves to heal what was broken. Jesus Christ does not come to condemn, but to restore through truth, repentance, and love in action. If this message touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or your own experience, and share this video with someone who may need it today. Together, let us continue spreading stories of faith, grace, and second chances on our channel.